She mocked a black waitress for speaking Italian to customers. Minutes later, the CEO summoned her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. The restaurant was bustling with the usual evening crowd. White tablecloths, sparkling glasses, and the low murmur of conversation as waiters and waitresses moved between tables, delivering meals with a practiced ease. At the far corner of the room, a woman in a sleek business suit laughed with her colleagues, her voice cutting through the air with a sharp, dismissive tone. Why is she speaking Italian to customers? It's so ridiculous. Like anyone cares about that here. The woman she was referring to, a young black waitress, froze for a moment, her tray hovering in midair as she served a group of regular customers. Her uniform was crisp, her face calm, but a knot of discomfort twisted in her stomach. She had overheard the comment, but she kept moving, her professionalism intact. For years, she had dealt with mockery and condescension from customers and even co-workers, yet she never allowed herself to show the hurt. She had been speaking Italian to the table because it was something her grandmother had taught her, a language of her heritage, something that made her feel connected to the past. But to the woman at the table, it was a source of ridicule. As she walked away, her mind raced, but she kept her pace steady, focusing on the task at hand. It was then that she saw him. The CEO of the restaurant chain, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, a figure who carried himself with authority, walked into the room. His sharp eyes scanned the restaurant, and his gaze landed on her. Without missing a beat, he made his way toward the front, passing her without a word. But his presence loomed large in the room, and she couldn't help but feel his gaze on her. The woman who had mocked her, sensing an opportunity, leaned toward the CEO. As he passed, a wicked smile on her face. You know, she's been speaking Italian to customers like she's trying to show off. It's so inappropriate, don't you think? The CEO stopped in his tracks, turning slowly to face the woman with an unreadable expression. I'll be right back, he said curtly, his voice cutting through the air with surprising authority. As he walked away, the woman stared after him, a mixture of confusion and anticipation on her face. Meanwhile, the young waitress continued her duties, her heart pounding in her chest. The air in the restaurant seemed to thicken, the energy shifting, but she remained focused, doing what she knew best, serving her customers with quiet grace. She never saw it coming. Minutes later, the CEO reappeared, his expression still unreadable. He walked straight up to her, his eyes locking with hers. I need to speak with you, he said, his tone firm yet calm. The room seemed to hush as the staff and patrons alike watched the exchange. Was this her moment? Was she about to be reprimanded, or worse, fired? Her mind raced, but she nodded silently, following him toward the back of the restaurant. The tension in the room was palpable, and everyone watched as the CEO and the waitress disappeared from sight. What would happen next? The story was just beginning. The young waitress followed the CEO through the back corridors of the restaurant, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Her mind raced. Why had he called her into his office? Was she about to lose her job for something as small as speaking Italian to a few customers? She hadn't meant to cause trouble. In fact, she had felt proud to connect with those guests in their native language, to bring a little piece of her heritage into the upscale environment. But now, she felt small, uncertain, and out of place. The CEO stopped in front of a large office door and turned to face her. He motioned for her to enter, and she hesitated for a moment before walking inside. The room was sleek, with polished wood floors and glass walls that offered a view of the bustling dining area below. It felt cold in a way that made her heart beat faster. He gestured toward a chair across from his desk, and she sat down carefully, not sure what to expect. The CEO, whose name she now knew was Jonathan Williams, took a seat behind his desk, leaning forward with his hands clasped in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy. I know what you're thinking, Jonathan said finally, his voice calm, almost soothing. You're worried that you're about to be fired, that this is the end of your job here. She didn't respond, but her hands, resting in her lap, were trembling slightly. She had no idea what to say. But that's not why I called you in here. Jonathan continued, his gaze steady. I've been watching you. Watching how you interact with the customers, the way you take your work seriously, how you handle difficult situations with grace. You're more than just a waitress here. She blinked, trying to process what he was saying. I don't understand, she finally managed to say. Why did you want to speak with me? Jonathan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the desk. Because, he said slowly, I've been dealing with something myself. A misconception, really. People here think you're just another employee, just another face in the crowd. But I see you differently. You have a strength in you, a quiet dignity that they don't see, that they don't understand. She felt a knot in her stomach loosen slightly. His words weren't what she expected, but they weren't the harsh reprimand she had feared either. You remind me of someone, he said, looking away for a moment, almost as if he were lost in thought. Someone I knew a long time ago. My grandmother. She used to tell me about how people from all walks of life deserve respect, how everyone has their own story, and how those stories matter. Your story matters. I can tell that you come from something more than just the job you do here. The waitress, still stunned, shifted in her chair. She had never heard anyone speak to her this way, especially not someone like Jonathan Williams, the CEO of such a prestigious restaurant. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, she whispered. Why would someone like you even care about me? Jonathan's eyes softened, and he gave her a small smile. Because I see your potential. And I think it's time for you to see it too. I'm offering you something, a chance. Something I don't give to everyone. She stared at him, unsure if she should be excited or nervous. What do you mean? She asked. Jonathan stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city lights that twinkled below. I'm offering you a position in management, he said, his voice low but firm. I know it might seem sudden, but I believe you have what it takes. You have the drive, the intelligence, and the work ethic to succeed. You just need a chance to prove it. The waitress's heart raced. This was the opportunity she had been dreaming of, but never imagined she'd actually get. She had worked so hard, just to make ends meet, just to survive. She never thought anyone would notice her enough to offer her something more. Jonathan turned back to face her, his expression serious but kind. Of course, I'm not offering this lightly. This job will be challenging. There will be expectations. But I believe in you. If you're willing to take this chance, we'll start you on a path that could change everything. She felt a rush of emotions flood through her, surprise, disbelief, hope. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that something better could happen. She took a deep breath and stood up, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. I won't let you down, she said. Jonathan nodded, his gaze steady. I know you won't. The room felt brighter now, the weight of her worries lifting, replaced by the possibility of something greater. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone with potential, someone who deserved a chance. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. The next few days felt like a blur. The young waitress, whose name was Maya, was both excited and terrified at the same time. After her conversation with Jonathan Williams, she felt like a door had been opened, a door she had always known was there, but never thought she could cross. The chance Jonathan had offered her was nothing short of a dream, yet it also came with expectations that made her feel overwhelmed. As she stood in front of the restaurant's office, preparing for her first day in management, she felt a knot in her stomach. She had never worked in an office environment before, let alone managed a team. Her hands were clammy as she adjusted her uniform, trying to steady her nerves. Today, everything was different. Maya walked into the office, her heart racing. Jonathan was already there, sitting at his desk, his expression as calm as ever. He stood up when he saw her, his demeanor professional yet welcoming. Maya. He greeted her, offering a smile that made her feel a little less tense. How are you feeling? A little nervous, she admitted, her voice quiet. But excited too. Jonathan nodded, understanding. That's perfectly normal. The work won't be easy, but I know you can handle it. I've seen the way you work with people. You have a natural way of making them feel heard and respected, and that's something not everyone can do. Maya's nerves eased a little. Jonathan's words, though simple, meant a lot to her. She had always prided herself on how she treated others, but she had never thought of it as a skill, just something she did because it felt right. Jonathan led her to a small conference room where the team members she would be working with were gathered. They were all older than her. Some had worked in the restaurant business for years. Maya felt a pang of insecurity, but she pushed it down. This was her chance. She couldn't let it slip away. "Everyone, this is Maya," Jonathan said, his voice firm and steady. "She'll be taking on a management role here, working closely with all of you. I trust she will bring a fresh perspective to the team. Maya, why don't you introduce yourself?" Maya took a deep breath and stood up straighter, her nerves suddenly disappearing. "Hi, I'm Maya. I've been working here as a waitress for a while now, but I've always had a passion for making things run smoothly and helping others. I'm excited for the opportunity to work with all of you and to learn from your experience." There was a moment of silence before one of the older employees, a woman named Clara, spoke up. "So, you've been a waitress? What makes you think you can handle management?" Her tone wasn't rude, but it was definitely skeptical. Maya felt the heat rise to her face, but she didn't let the doubt in Clara's voice shake her. She knew she had what it took. "I may not have worked in management before," she said, her voice steady, "but I know what it's like to work hard and take pride in what you do. I know how important it is to make sure everyone feels valued, and I'm here to support each of you in whatever way I can." The room was quiet again, but this time, there was a shift in the air. Clara, who had seemed the most doubtful, nodded slightly, a small gesture of acknowledgement. Jonathan smiled at Maya, clearly pleased with her response. "That's what I like to hear," he said. "Now let's get to work. We have a lot to do." Over the next few hours, Maya shadowed Jonathan and the rest of the management team, learning the ins and outs of the business. She found herself more capable than she had expected, and by the end of the day, she was feeling more confident in her new role. As the shift came to an end, Jonathan pulled Maya aside. "You did great today," he told her. "I can see why I made the right choice in giving you this opportunity. Keep this up, and there's no limit to what you can achieve here." Maya smiled, feeling a rush of pride. She had done it. She had taken that first step, and it felt like the beginning of something new. It wasn't just the job that excited her. It was the chance to prove to herself that she was more than what others had assumed about her. The next few weeks flew by. Maya quickly adapted to her new role, gaining the respect of her colleagues and earning the trust of her team. She worked tirelessly, managing everything from the front of the house to inventory, always with the goal of creating a welcoming environment for both the staff and the customers. But her rise to management didn't go unnoticed. As Maya continued to excel, whispers started circulating among some of the other employees. They couldn't understand why Jonathan had chosen her, a young waitress with no formal management experience, over others who had been in the business much longer. But Maya didn't let the gossip get to her. She knew her worth, and she was determined to prove it every day. One evening, while she was overseeing the dinner rush, Maya received a surprise visit from Jonathan. He had a serious look on his face, and she immediately felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Maya," he began, "I've been thinking about something. We've seen a lot of growth here since you started. Your team is doing well, and I think it's time to take things to the next level. How would you feel about taking on more responsibility?" Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I'm offering you a chance to manage a second location," Jonathan said. "It's a big step, but I believe you're ready for it." Maya couldn't believe it. This was the opportunity she had dreamed of but never imagined would come so soon. She looked at Jonathan, her mind racing with the possibilities. "Yes," she said finally, her voice firm. "I'm ready." I was feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness as I stepped into the second location of the restaurant chain. Jonathan's offer had been unexpected, but I couldn't deny that I was ready for this. I had worked hard to get to this point, and now the opportunity to manage a whole new restaurant, to make it my own, was in my hands. The new location was much bigger than the one I had worked at before, and the vibe was completely different. It was located in a more upscale part of the city, surrounded by high-rise buildings and expensive boutiques. The decor was sleek, modern, and sophisticated, much like the clientele it attracted. I stood in the front, taking in the view of the restaurant, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel proud. I wasn't just a waitress anymore. I was a leader now. As the first day began, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I had a team to lead, customers to satisfy, and operations to run smoothly. My training had prepared me for a lot, but this felt different. This was on me now. I was the one who needed to make decisions. My mind raced with questions and concerns as I greeted my new team. I could see some familiar faces, but there were also new employees who didn't know me, didn't know what I could do. I felt a twinge of doubt, but I pushed it aside. All right, team. I began, my voice calm yet firm. We're going to make this place run like clockwork. Every shift, every order, every guest matters. Let's work together to give them the best experience they've ever had. I could see the reactions of the staff. Some of them nodded, some looked at me with skepticism, but I knew I had to stay confident. The pressure was high, but so was the potential. Throughout the day, things were moving quickly. The orders were piling up, the kitchen was buzzing, and I was darting between the floor and the back office, trying to make sure everything was running smoothly. I was in charge now, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like I was still learning, still figuring it all out. And then, during the dinner rush, everything seemed to fall apart. The kitchen was behind, orders were wrong, and the front of the house was struggling to keep up with the demand. I could feel the stress building in the air. I could hear the frustration in the voices of the servers and the loud, impatient murmurs from the customers. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I couldn't let the pressure overwhelm me. I was the one in charge now. I made my way to the kitchen, where the head chef was frantically trying to keep things under control. "What's going on back here?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but authoritative. "We're behind on the orders," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "There's too much happening all at once, and we're trying to catch up." I nodded, processing the information quickly. "All right, let's prioritize. Focus on the most important orders first. I'll take care of the front." I turned and walked back to the front of the house, where the servers were trying to calm down some of the more vocal customers. "What's the situation?" I asked, looking at the team. "The customers are getting upset," one of the servers said, her face tight with anxiety. "We're behind, and some of the orders are wrong." "Okay," I said, holding up my hand to get their attention. "We're going to handle this. I want everyone to stay calm. Let's communicate with the kitchen and get this sorted. We'll make it right." I could see some of the team members looking at me, waiting to see if I had a plan. And I did. I knew that in times like this, the most important thing was to stay calm, stay focused, and be transparent with the customers. "We're a little behind right now, but we're making sure everything is perfect. I'm going to personally make sure your order is correct, and I'll be checking in on you every few minutes." "Thank you for your patience," I said, addressing the guests directly. As I spoke to the customers, I could see their tension start to ease. They weren't angry anymore. They were just hungry and frustrated. But they appreciated the honesty, the acknowledgement of the delay. I worked with the team, making sure everything was delivered as quickly as possible, and in the end, we got through the rush. It wasn't perfect, but we had done our best, and that was all I could ask for. As the night wound down and the last guests left, I sat down in the back office, exhausted. I had made it through the first day, but it hadn't been easy. I knew I had a long road ahead of me, full of challenges, but I also knew I had what it took to succeed. Jonathan had seen something in me that I hadn't fully realized myself, and now it was time to prove him right. I wasn't just a waitress anymore. I was a leader, and this was only the beginning. I sat in my new office, the weight of the position sinking in. The second location was now officially under my care. The night after our busy dinner rush, when everything seemed to fall apart, but we managed to pull through, I had finally begun to feel the full responsibility of what Jonathan had handed me. The reality of being in charge was both exhilarating and daunting. My team was starting to settle in, but there were still challenges I had to face. I was still figuring out the best way to lead them, to earn their trust, and to prove that I belonged in this role. As I glanced over the paperwork on my desk, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed in such a short period. A few months ago, I had been a waitress, just trying to get by, never imagining I'd be in this position. Now, I was managing a team, making decisions that affected the lives of the staff and the success of this business. I closed my eyes for a moment, reminding myself to stay grounded. This was what I had worked for. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. It was Jonathan. I picked it up quickly. "Maya, I need you to come by the main location today. We have some things to discuss," he said, his voice steady and businesslike. "Sure, I'll be there in an hour," I replied. The rest of the morning was spent preparing for the meeting. I reviewed the financials of my location, ensuring that everything was running smoothly. The restaurant was doing well, but there were still areas that needed improvement. The pressure to perform was constant, and I felt it every time I entered the building. As I drove to the main location, I couldn't shake the feeling of nervous anticipation. I wondered what Jonathan wanted to discuss. Was this a routine check-in, or was he going to ask more of me? When I arrived, Jonathan was waiting in his office. He looked up from his desk and smiled when he saw me. "Maya, come in," he said, gesturing to the chair in front of him. "Have a seat." I sat down, still unsure of what to expect. "How's the new location going?" Jonathan asked, his tone casual, though his eyes were sharp. "It's going well. There have been some bumps, of course, but we're getting into a rhythm. I'm learning a lot." He nodded. "Good. I'm glad to hear that. You're doing great, Maya. I'm proud of you." I smiled, grateful for his praise, but I could feel the weight of what was coming next. Jonathan leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "I want to offer you another opportunity," he said, his voice steady. My heart skipped a beat. "Another opportunity? What do you mean?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "We're expanding the business," he said. "I want you to manage a third location. But it's a bigger challenge than the second. It's a high-end area, and the competition is fierce." I felt a rush of excitement and nervousness all at once. Managing a third location was a huge step up, but it was also exactly what I had been working for. "I think you're ready for it," Jonathan continued. "This will push you further than you've ever been pushed, but I believe in your ability to rise to the occasion." I took a deep breath, the reality of his words sinking in. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady. "I won't let you down." Jonathan smiled again, that same reassuring smile that had been a constant since the moment he gave me the first opportunity. "I know you won't. I've seen what you're capable of." The rest of the meeting was a blur as we discussed logistics and the details of the new location. By the time I left, I had a new sense of determination. This was my chance to prove myself even further. As I drove back to the second location, I couldn't help but think about how much I had grown in such a short time. A few months ago, I had been unsure of myself, wondering if I could ever be more than just a waitress. Now, I was in charge of multiple locations, making decisions that could shape the future of the business. I thought about my team, the people who had become my family in this journey. They trusted me, and I wasn't about to let them down. That night, as I sat at my desk in the quiet of the restaurant, I reflected on how far I had come. From the young woman who had been laughed at for speaking Italian, to the leader now managing multiple locations, I had proven to myself that I could do more than just survive. I could thrive. I wasn't just a waitress anymore. I was a leader, and I was ready for whatever came next. I walked into the new restaurant location, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the excitement of what this new challenge meant. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind since Jonathan offered me the opportunity to manage not one, but now 2 locations. It was a leap forward, and I had made it. No longer just a waitress, I had proven that I could handle the pressures of managing. But now, with this third location looming ahead, the pressure was only growing. As I made my way into the sleek, high-end restaurant, I was immediately struck by the atmosphere. The interior was gorgeous, with modern finishes and elegant lighting that gave it an upscale, polished feel. I could already sense the difference in clientele, well-dressed professionals, families, and tourists who came to see and be seen. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was an experience. The challenge was clear. This wasn't going to be like the second location where I had found my footing. This was a completely new world with higher stakes, more demanding customers, and an environment where every detail had to be perfect. As I stepped into the kitchen, I was greeted by the head chef, who immediately began walking me through the day's plans. "We're short on a couple of staff today," he said, looking over the schedule. "But the kitchen is prepped, and we're ready to go." "Got it." I nodded, trying to settle the nerves that were bubbling inside me. "I'll make sure everything runs smoothly front of house. Let's do this." We walked out into the main dining area, and I looked around, mentally checking everything off in my head. The tables were set perfectly, the bar was stocked, and the staff was preparing for the dinner rush. As the first guests started arriving, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I could do this. I was ready. The night progressed quickly, and I found myself constantly moving between the front and the back, making sure the team was working efficiently, helping with any issues that came up, and constantly checking in with the customers. It was a balancing act, and for the most part, it went smoothly. But just as things were looking up, a situation arose that was beyond my control. One of the waitstaff came to me with a problem. A guest at one of the VIP tables had sent back their meal, cold. The guest was a well-known food critic who had been writing a column for a prestigious magazine for years. I knew this couldn't just be a simple fix. This wasn't just about customer service. It was about the reputation of the restaurant. "We can't afford to upset him," I said under my breath as I walked over to the table. I approached the critic's table with a calm, professional smile, but inside, my heart was racing. "Good evening," I said. "I understand there's an issue with your meal." The critic, an older man with a sharp gaze, looked up at me. He didn't smile. "Yes," he said coldly. "The steak is undercooked, and the vegetables are cold. I'm not sure how you can call this fine dining." My stomach churned. This was the last thing I needed on my first night running this location. "I'm terribly sorry for the inconvenience," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let me have the kitchen prepare a fresh plate for you. It'll be our pleasure to correct the mistake." "I don't have time for that," the critic snapped. "I have a deadline to meet. You need to make this right now." I could feel the weight of his words, but I refused to let the pressure show. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to speak to the chef personally," I said, holding my composure. "I'll ensure that your next dish meets your expectations. It's the least I can do." The critic gave a nod, still frowning, and I turned to the kitchen with a renewed sense of urgency. Back in the kitchen, I explained the situation to the chef, who immediately took action to correct the meal. As the new plate was being prepared, I returned to the front to check on the rest of the tables. The tension in the air was palpable. I couldn't afford another mistake, not tonight. When the dish was ready, I returned to the critic's table. I placed the new dish in front of him, watching his reaction carefully. "Here you go, sir," I said. "I hope this is more to your liking." He took a bite, chewing slowly, and for a moment, I held my breath. He put his fork down and looked up at me. "This is much better," he said, nodding. "Finally, you get it right." I exhaled a silent sigh of relief. "I'm glad it's to your satisfaction, sir," I said, keeping my tone even. "Thank you for your patience." The rest of the evening went off without a hitch, and by the time the last guests left, I was exhausted. But there was a sense of accomplishment I hadn't expected. The critic's review would either make or break the restaurant's reputation, but I had managed to turn a potential disaster into a success. As I closed up for the night, I felt the weight of the responsibility, but it wasn't as heavy as it had been before. This was my job now. I was the one who made the decisions, who ensured everything ran smoothly, and I was learning how to thrive under pressure. The next morning, as I checked my emails, I saw that the critic had written his review. I held my breath as I clicked the link, unsure of what to expect. To my surprise, the review was glowing. "A seamless dining experience," he had written. "Flawless service and a kitchen that knows how to recover from a mistake." I couldn't help but smile. I had done it. The next chapter of my journey had just begun, and I was ready for whatever came next. I was beginning to settle into my role at the new location. The first few weeks had been an uphill battle, but we were starting to find a rhythm. My team was growing more confident in their roles, and I was learning more about the nuances of managing a high-end restaurant. But just as I thought I had everything under control, something unexpected happened that would challenge everything I thought I knew. It started as a routine evening, with the restaurant packed as usual. The staff was moving quickly, the guests were enjoying their meals, and everything seemed to be running smoothly. That is, until a man walked in, his presence commanding the room. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded an air of importance. He wasn't a regular guest, but he was certainly one who would draw attention. As he approached the hostess stand, I noticed her look of uncertainty. She hadn't recognized him. I stepped forward, introducing myself with a professional smile. "Good evening, sir. How may I assist you tonight?" He looked at me for a moment, sizing me up, before speaking. "I'm looking for Jonathan Williams." His voice was low, but it carried a weight that made the air in the room shift. My stomach dropped. Jonathan had been a mentor to me, but he was also busy with other projects, and I hadn't expected him to be involved with anything related to this man. "I'm sorry, sir. Jonathan isn't here tonight. Is there something I can help you with?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man didn't seem bothered by my answer. "I'll wait for him," he said, his tone firm, almost demanding. I nodded and gestured toward the waiting area. "Of course. Please feel free to wait, and I'll inform him as soon as he's available." I stepped back into the main dining area, my mind racing. I quickly made my way to the office and grabbed my phone, calling Jonathan. The line rang a few times before he picked up. Maya, what's going on? He asked, sounding distracted. Jonathan, there's a man here. Looking for you, I said. He says his name is Mr. Graham, and he seems very serious. Should I do anything? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Jonathan's voice was calm when he spoke again. Mr. Graham? Tell him I'm on my way. Don't let him leave. Got it, I replied, hanging up quickly. I walked back into the dining area, my mind still racing. What could this Mr. Graham want with Jonathan? And why had he insisted on waiting for him? I returned to the waiting area where Mr. Graham sat, watching him carefully. He was flipping through a folder, looking completely unfazed by the hustle and bustle of the restaurant around him. His calm demeanor only added to the sense of unease building inside me. After what seemed like an eternity, Jonathan finally arrived. He entered the restaurant with his usual air of confidence, but there was a new sharpness to his demeanor when he saw Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, Jonathan said, extending his hand. It's been a while. Mr. Graham stood up slowly, accepting the handshake, but his gaze never left me. Yes, it has, he replied. I need to speak with you about something important. Jonathan glanced at me briefly, then nodded. Of course. Let's talk in private. They walked toward Jonathan's office, and I felt a strange mix of relief and curiosity. What could this man want with Jonathan? And why was he here of all places? I stood there for a moment, watching them disappear behind the closed door of the office, the weight of the situation still lingering. It wasn't long before my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jonathan. Stay close. Something's not right. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew it wasn't good. A few minutes passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I paced around the dining area, trying to focus on the customers, but my mind kept returning to the conversation happening behind that office door. Finally, Jonathan emerged, his face unreadable. He walked quickly toward me, gesturing for me to follow. Come with me, he said, his voice low. I followed him into the back office, and once we were alone, he spoke. There's something you need to know. Mr. Graham isn't just a business partner. He's someone from my past, someone I've been trying to avoid. What does he want? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, his expression tense. He wants to buy out this restaurant chain, he said, his voice edged with frustration. He's been trying to get me to sell for months, but I've refused. Now he's making his move. He wants full control, and he won't stop until he gets it. My stomach twisted at the thought of losing everything I had worked for. The restaurant was more than just a job to me now. It was my future. What are we going to do? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Jonathan looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and regret. We fight back, he said firmly. We can't let him take this from us. I need you to help me. We need to come up with a strategy to keep the business in our hands. His words fueled something inside me, a fire I hadn't realized I had. I had worked too hard, and I wasn't going to let anyone take away what I had built. I'm with you, I said, the resolve in my voice clear. We'll figure this out. Together. The next few days were filled with tension. Jonathan and I had begun strategizing, putting together a plan to protect the business and prevent Mr. Graham from taking control. We knew it wouldn't be easy. He was powerful, connected, and determined to have the restaurant chain under his control. But we weren't going to let that happen without a fight. The pressure was mounting, and I could feel it weighing on me more than ever. Every decision I made felt like it could tip the scale in either direction. Would we be able to hold on to what we had built, or would Mr. Graham's plan succeed? As the days went by, I became more and more involved in the legal aspects of the business, trying to figure out how we could secure a deal that would keep us in control. I spent hours in meetings, reading over contracts, and discussing strategies with Jonathan and his legal team. It was exhausting, but I couldn't afford to back down. Then one morning, things took a turn. I had just finished a meeting with the restaurant's finance team when I got a call from Jonathan. Maya, I need you to come to the main location, he said urgently. Now, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what was happening, but I could tell it was serious. I quickly gathered my things and drove over, my mind racing. When I arrived, I found Jonathan in his office, pacing back and forth. What's going on? I asked, trying to stay calm. It's worse than we thought, Jonathan replied, his voice tight with stress. Mr. Graham is pulling strings behind the scenes. He's not just trying to buy us out. He's using his connections to make sure we don't have any other options. He's threatening to expose some of our financial records unless we agree to sell. My stomach dropped. This was a threat we hadn't anticipated. Jonathan continued, "We need to act fast. If we don't do something now, he's going to make sure we're forced into a position where we have no choice but to sell." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What can we do?" I asked, feeling the weight of the situation on my shoulders. Jonathan paused, looking at me. "I've been thinking about it, and I think we need to make a move before he has the chance to destroy us. We need to turn the tables on him." "How?" I asked, my mind spinning with possibilities. "We expose him first," Jonathan said, his voice sharp with determination. "We find out what he's hiding, what he's been doing behind the scenes. We make sure the public knows what kind of person he really is." I nodded, understanding what he was saying. It was risky, but it might be the only way to beat him at his own game. "I'll help you," I said without hesitation. "We'll do whatever it takes." Over the next few days, Jonathan, his legal team, and I worked tirelessly to gather information on Mr. Graham. We dug through his business dealings, looking for any cracks we could exploit. We found a few leads, some shady financial transactions, questionable dealings with other companies, and even some evidence of bribery in his past business practices. It was enough to make him vulnerable, but we needed to move quickly before he found out we were onto him. We reached out to a few trusted journalists, feeding them the information we had uncovered. We needed the media's help to expose Graham's wrongdoings and force him into the public eye. The clock was ticking, and we had to act fast. Finally, the day came when we were ready to make our move. We called a press conference, hoping that it would be the key to turning the tables. Jonathan stood at the front of the room, his calm demeanor hiding the nerves that were building inside me. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as Jonathan began to speak. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady. "Today, I'm here to talk about something very important. For the past several weeks, we've been dealing with a situation that has threatened the future of our company." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "We've recently discovered that a powerful businessman, Mr. Graham, has been using his influence and connections to try to force us into a sale. What we didn't know until recently is that he has been involved in several questionable activities, and we've uncovered evidence of his dishonest dealings." The reporters shifted in their seats, scribbling notes, their eyes locked on Jonathan. "We have gathered proof that Mr. Graham has been involved in illegal activities, including financial fraud and bribery. We are working with the authorities to ensure that these matters are properly investigated and addressed." I could feel my heart pounding as Jonathan spoke. This was it, the moment that could change everything. I stood behind him, trying to keep my composure. "We will not be intimidated," Jonathan continued, his voice firm. "Our company is built on integrity, and we will fight to protect it. Mr. Graham's attempt to take control through deceit and manipulation will not succeed." There was a moment of stunned silence in the room before the questions started coming. "Can you confirm the details of the financial fraud?" one reporter asked. "What other evidence do you have against Mr. Graham?" another inquired. Jonathan handled the questions with ease, his confidence unwavering. As the press conference came to a close, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had exposed Graham, and now the world knew what kind of man he truly was. But this was only the beginning. We still had to wait and see how the public would react and how Graham would respond to being caught in the spotlight. But one thing was clear: we were no longer just fighting to protect our business. We were fighting for our reputation, for our future, and for everything we had worked so hard to build. The days following the press conference were a blur of uncertainty and anticipation. Jonathan and I spent hours in meetings, working with our legal team, and strategizing our next move. The news of Mr. Graham's shady dealings had spread like wildfire, and the media was now focused on exposing him for all to see. The public was responding with outrage, and the pressure was building. But even with the media on our side and the legal proceedings beginning, we knew that the fight was far from over. Graham wasn't going to give up easily. His response came swiftly. The next day, we received a letter from his lawyers, a thinly veiled threat designed to shake us. They were demanding a meeting to settle the issue privately, before the case could go any further. I could feel the tension in the air. Jonathan and I both knew this was a pivotal moment. The thought of sitting down with Graham and negotiating with him made me uneasy, but Jonathan was resolute. This is just another move in his game. He wants to intimidate us, force us into a corner, Jonathan said as we sat in his office, reading through the letter. But we're not backing down. I agreed. The idea of negotiating with a man like Graham, who had already shown his true colors, didn't sit well with me. But Jonathan was right. We had to stay strong. We couldn't let him think he could bully us into submission. That afternoon, we arranged the meeting. Graham's lawyers had insisted on a neutral location, an upscale private club in the heart of the city. It felt like we were walking into the lion's den. As Jonathan and I entered the club, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be the most important meeting of our lives. We were up against a man who had already proven he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. The room was filled with tension as we took our seats at the long, polished table. Across from us sat Graham, his cold, calculating gaze fixed on us. His presence was overpowering, and for a moment, I felt like we were out of our depth. He didn't waste any time getting to the point. "You've made a big mistake," Graham said, his voice smooth but laced with underlying anger. "This public spectacle won't end well for you. You can't win against me." Jonathan met his gaze, his voice calm and controlled. "We're not backing down, Mr. Graham. We have the truth on our side, and we're not going to let you manipulate us into giving up what's ours." The air between them was thick with hostility, but Jonathan remained steady, his confidence unwavering. Graham chuckled, the sound low and menacing. "You think the truth will save you? You're naive. I've built my empire for years. I have connections, resources, and influence that you can't even imagine. You can't compete with that." His words were meant to intimidate, but they didn't faze me. I knew Jonathan had a different kind of power. "We've already shown that we're willing to fight for what we believe in," Jonathan said. "And we're not going to stop now, no matter how much you try to bully us." Graham's expression darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might lose his composure. But he quickly regained his cold demeanor. "We'll see how long your fight lasts. But let me make you an offer. Sell the business to me. I'll make you a generous deal, one that will set you up for life." Jonathan shook his head. "We're not interested in your generosity. You're trying to take what doesn't belong to you, and we won't let you." Graham leaned back in his chair, studying Jonathan for a moment. "You think you can stop me? I've been in this game too long. You're nothing but a small obstacle." His arrogance was almost palpable, but Jonathan remained unshaken. "We've already done more than you expected. We've exposed you for who you are, and now the public knows the truth. That's something you can't buy." Graham's eyes narrowed. "You think this is over? You think you've won? This is just the beginning." Jonathan's voice remained steady, but there was a sharpness to it. "This will be the last time you make threats. We'll be taking this to the authorities, and we'll make sure everyone knows the truth about you." The meeting ended with no resolution, but I could feel a shift in the air. We had held our ground. Graham had underestimated us, and now he knew that. We were not going to back down. As we left the club, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. We had faced him, stared him down, and refused to let him win. But I also knew the fight was far from over. There were still battles ahead, but we had made our stand, and we were ready for whatever came next. The next few days were a whirlwind. Our legal team worked tirelessly, preparing for the next stage of the fight. Graham was pulling out all the stops, using his influence to try to discredit us, but we kept pushing forward. The press was still on our side, and public opinion was swaying in our favor. But just as we thought we were gaining momentum, something unexpected happened. A whistleblower from Graham's company came forward with a bombshell revelation. They had evidence of Graham's involvement in illegal activities far worse than we had even imagined: bribery, embezzlement, and much more. The story hit the news like a tidal wave, and Graham's world began to unravel. For the first time, it felt like we were finally gaining the upper hand. But I knew we couldn't stop now. The stakes were too high. We had to keep going, and we had to make sure that the truth came out completely. As I stood by Jonathan's side, watching the news unfold, I felt a renewed sense of determination. This wasn't just about protecting the business anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. The following days were a whirlwind of activity, with each new development in the case pushing us closer to the finish line. Jonathan and I knew we had reached a pivotal moment. The information we had uncovered about Mr. Graham's corrupt practices was now out in the open, and public opinion was turning in our favor. The press had picked up the whistleblower's revelation, and the once powerful businessman was beginning to feel the heat. But we couldn't afford to relax, not yet. Our legal team was working tirelessly to ensure that Graham's activities were fully exposed, while the media's scrutiny continued to intensify. As much as we wanted to celebrate our progress, we both knew this was just one battle in a much larger war. The real test was still ahead. A week after the whistleblower's statement, we received another surprise. A call from Graham's lawyers. Jonathan's expression darkened as he read the message. "He wants to meet again," Jonathan said, his voice tight. "This time, he's offering a settlement." I felt my stomach drop. A settlement? After everything he'd done? It didn't sit right with me. But Jonathan's expression remained unreadable. "We have to hear him out. This could be a trap, but it could also be his way of trying to minimize the fallout." I nodded, trying to stay focused. "When do we meet?" Jonathan set the phone down and looked at me. "Tomorrow." The next day, we found ourselves walking into a private conference room at a law office downtown. Graham was already there, his cold eyes fixed on us as we entered. His usual arrogance seemed to have softened, but there was something about his demeanor that still radiated power. He didn't rise to greet us, simply motioning to the chairs across from him. I could feel the tension building in the room as we sat down. Graham's lawyers were present, their faces stern and unreadable. "Jonathan," Graham began, his voice calm but laced with underlying frustration. "I'm offering you a chance to walk away from this mess with dignity. You don't want this to drag on any longer." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly does walking away with dignity mean?" Graham leaned forward, his fingers tapping on the table. "I'm willing to offer you a buyout, a generous one. You take the money, and we go our separate ways. No more public scandals, no more investigations. We can end this today quietly." The offer hung in the air like a heavy weight. I could feel my blood pressure rising. How dare he think he could just buy us off after everything he had put us through? But Jonathan remained calm, his gaze never leaving Graham. "You think you can just buy your way out of this?" Jonathan asked, his voice low. "You've already made your move, Mr. Graham. You've tried to manipulate, intimidate, and bully us into submission. But it's not working. You've shown the world who you really are, and now you're going to have to face the consequences." Graham's eyes flashed with anger. "You don't understand," he said, his voice tightening. "This isn't just about a business deal. This is about power. I have the resources to crush you, Jonathan. You can either accept the offer and leave with something, or you can keep fighting me and lose everything." The words hung in the air, heavy with threat. I could feel the weight of his words pushing down on me, but I wasn't backing down. Jonathan remained composed, but I could sense his resolve hardening. "We've already lost something, Mr. Graham," Jonathan replied. "You've taken enough from us. But what you don't understand is that we've built something here, something that can't be bought or sold. And no amount of money will ever take that away." There was a silence in the room as Graham processed Jonathan's words. He sat back in his chair, his eyes narrowing, calculating his next move. Finally, he spoke. "You really think you can win this? You're outmatched, outgunned. The longer you fight, the more damage you'll do to your reputation. You're playing a losing game." Jonathan met his gaze without flinching. "We've already won. The public knows the truth, and we've exposed you for who you are. You can try to bury this, but it won't work. You've lost." Graham's face twisted with frustration, but he didn't respond. He simply stood up, his lawyers following suit. "We're done here," he said coldly. "You'll regret this." As he walked out of the room, I could feel the tension lift from my shoulders, but it wasn't over. We knew this wasn't the last time we'd be hearing from him. Graham wasn't the kind of man who would just walk away, but we had made it clear that we weren't going to back down. The next few weeks were filled with a mix of legal battles, media coverage, and strategic planning. As we continued to push forward, we saw the cracks in Graham's empire begin to grow wider. His business partners started distancing themselves from him, and the public began to view him with disdain. The momentum was shifting in our favor. But even as we celebrated the small victories, we knew that the real battle was still ahead. Graham was relentless, and we couldn't afford to let our guard down. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of a mirror, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about how far I had come, from the young waitress just trying to make a living to now, leading the charge against a powerful adversary. I had proven to myself that I could do more than just survive. I could thrive. And as I looked into my own eyes, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. The fight wasn't over, but we were closer to the end than we had ever been before. As the weeks went by, the pressure from Mr. Graham continued to build. His public image was tarnished, but his influence remained, and he was far from giving up. Jonathan and I knew that. Although the fight was still ongoing, we had already made significant strides in turning the tide in our favor. However, even with all the progress we'd made, the weight of the situation was wearing on me. There were still so many unknowns. Would we really win? Could we outsmart someone as powerful as Mr. Graham? I sat in my office one evening, the restaurant now quiet after the rush. The sounds of the city outside the window felt distant, almost like the world was pausing, waiting for the next big move. I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Jonathan had been working nonstop, meeting with lawyers, media, and stakeholders, but tonight, he was late. It had been a few days since we'd last spoken to Graham directly, and the silence was unnerving. My phone buzzed, and I picked it up quickly, hoping for some sort of answer to the lingering questions in my mind. It was a message from Jonathan. We need to meet. It's urgent. My heart sank as I quickly gathered my things and drove to the main location. When I arrived, Jonathan was already in his office, his face drawn and tired, but determined. The moment I walked in, I knew something had shifted. What's going on? I asked, trying to stay calm. I've just gotten off the phone with our legal team, Jonathan said, running a hand through his hair. Graham is stepping up his game. He's got another angle, and it's dangerous. My stomach twisted. What do you mean? Jonathan took a deep breath before speaking. He's trying to hit us where it hurts the most, our employees. He's targeting the people who rely on this business for their livelihood. If we don't fold, he's going to start making sure the staff is caught in the middle. I froze. What is he planning to do? Jonathan's voice was grim. He's threatening to pull all of his financial support, cutting us off completely. If that happens, we won't be able to pay our staff, keep the restaurant open, or even maintain the locations. He's betting we'll crumble without the resources we rely on. A cold chill ran down my spine. The thought of our team being affected by this fight, losing their jobs because of Graham's greed, was unbearable. We can't let that happen, I said, my voice shaking slightly. We have to do something. We can't let him win like that. Jonathan nodded. I'm going to need you more than ever now. We have to make sure this doesn't destroy everything we've worked for, everything our staff has worked for. We both sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. But then Jonathan straightened up, determination flashing in his eyes. I've got a plan. We'll turn the tables on Graham. We need to make sure his manipulation doesn't tear us apart. But this time, we need to be smarter, faster, and more strategic than he is. I felt a spark of hope flicker inside me. What's the plan? I asked, ready to fight back. Jonathan leaned forward, outlining the next steps. We're going to need to rally the staff. They need to know what's happening and that we're fighting for them. We can't let Graham break their spirit. Then, we need to go public. We'll find out where he's vulnerable and expose him for the person he really is, someone willing to use people's livelihoods as leverage for his own gain. If we can get the public on our side, there's no way he can win. The plan was risky, but it was the only shot we had. We couldn't just sit back and let Graham tear everything down. It was time to fight with everything we had left. The next few days were a whirlwind. I spoke with the team, explaining what was at stake and why we had to stand together. Some of them were nervous, others were angry, but most of them understood. They weren't just working for a paycheck anymore. They were working for something bigger, something worth fighting for. As we gathered our evidence and prepared to go public with the next phase of our strategy, we received unexpected support from an unlikely source. One of Graham's former business partners, someone who had fallen out with him years ago, reached out to us. They had seen the way Graham operated and wanted to make sure the truth came out. They provided us with critical information that could tip the scales in our favor, exposing even more of Graham's illicit dealings. It was a turning point. With this new information in hand, we began preparing for the next round of media exposure. We would take our fight to the press, letting the world know that Graham wasn't just a businessman. He was a manipulator, willing to ruin lives for personal gain. As the day of the public announcement approached, I couldn't help but feel a mix of nerves and determination. We were about to take the fight to a whole new level. But I wasn't scared anymore. I knew that we had the truth on our side. And no matter how hard Graham tried to break us, we were stronger. We had the support of our team, the truth, and our resolve. The battle was far from over, but this time, it felt like we were finally on the right side of it. The days after the press release felt like a blur, each one blending into the next as we watched the fallout from Graham's exposed actions unfold in real time. The media coverage was relentless, with new details about his corrupt practices coming to light daily. Public opinion had swung firmly in our favor, and it seemed like the tide was finally turning against him. However, even though the media was now on our side, the battle was far from over. Graham wasn't a man who gave up easily, and we all knew that he would stop at nothing to protect his empire, no matter the cost. The next step was crucial. With his reputation in tatters, Graham's only remaining weapon was his influence. He had deep ties to powerful figures in the business world, and we had to be prepared for his next move. Jonathan and I spent hours strategizing, speaking with our lawyers, and preparing for what we anticipated would be a long and drawn-out legal battle. The hardest part wasn't just the pressure. It was the uncertainty of knowing that Graham was capable of anything. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally. But we pressed on, determined to keep the business intact and protect everything we had worked for. One evening, Jonathan called me into his office, his face serious. "We need to talk about our next move," he said, motioning for me to take a seat. "I've been in touch with some of our investors, and it's clear that Graham isn't finished yet. He's going to try to come after us legally, using whatever leverage he can find. We need to be ready for that." I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. "What are we going to do?" "We have to fight back," Jonathan said, his voice unwavering. "But we need to be smart. We can't let him use the legal system to drag us down. We need to hit him where it hurts, his finances, his credibility." Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly, gathering all the evidence we could find on Graham's illegal dealings. Our legal team combed through every document, every contract, every email, looking for something that could give us an edge in the upcoming legal battle. It was a painstaking process, but we knew it was necessary. We also began preparing for a larger public campaign, one that would further expose Graham's true nature and rally the public behind us. Our goal was simple. We needed to make sure that Graham's reputation was permanently tarnished and that he could never recover. As the days wore on, I began to feel the weight of the situation even more. There were moments when the pressure seemed too much to bear, when the constant strain of the battle felt overwhelming. But every time I started to doubt myself, I thought about our team, about the people who depended on us. We couldn't afford to lose. The day of the court hearing arrived, and it felt like the culmination of everything we had worked for. The courthouse was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as the proceedings began. Jonathan and I sat together in the front row, the weight of the moment heavy on our shoulders. We knew that this was it, the moment that would determine the future of the business. The case was intense. Graham's lawyers fought tooth and nail, throwing everything they could at us in an attempt to discredit our evidence. But our team was ready. We had the truth on our side, and we weren't going to back down. As the trial went on, it became clear that Graham's influence wasn't going to be enough to save him. The evidence we had gathered, his financial records, emails, and testimonies from former employees, was damning. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin, and with each passing day, it felt like the walls were closing in on Graham. As the final arguments were made, Jonathan stood up, his voice strong and clear. "The truth is simple," he said, addressing the judge in the courtroom. "Mr. Graham is a man who has used his power, his wealth, and his influence to manipulate others, to cheat and deceive. He has done everything in his power to take what isn't his, to destroy what others have worked so hard to build. But today, we are here to stop that. We will not let him destroy what we've built. We will not back down." His words resonated through the room, and I could feel a sense of resolve settle over me. We had made it this far. We couldn't stop now. When the judge delivered the verdict, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted. Graham was found guilty of multiple counts of fraud and manipulation. His assets were frozen, and he was banned from ever holding a position in the business world again. It wasn't just a victory for us. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been wronged by someone like him. As the news spread, I felt a sense of pride that I hadn't expected. We had done it. We had fought for what was ours and won. But even more than that, we had done it together. The team had rallied behind us, and the business had emerged stronger than ever. We knew it wasn't over. There would always be challenges, always new battles to fight. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. We had proven that no matter how powerful someone was, the truth would always win in the end. As I stood outside the courthouse, looking up at the sky, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. The journey had been long, but we had made it through. And now, with a renewed sense of purpose, we were ready for whatever came next. The victory over Graham felt like a long-awaited breath of fresh air, but it was also the beginning of a new set of challenges. With Graham's influence now completely dismantled, Jonathan and I could finally begin to focus on rebuilding what had been shaken over the past few months. The legal battle had taken its toll on everyone, but the relief of knowing we had won was palpable. However, the weight of leadership was still very much on my shoulders. The business was still ours to run, and now it was time to steer it in the right direction. The first step was to bring the team back together, to remind them why we were in this business to begin with, to create something meaningful, to build a legacy. The restaurant had always been about more than just the food. It had been about the people we served and the relationships we built with our staff. As I walked through the front doors of the restaurant, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I could see the changes happening already. The energy was different now. People were smiling more, and the usual tension that had filled the air was gone. Jonathan and I had spent hours discussing what needed to be done, and we knew that we couldn't waste any more time. It was time to move forward, to secure the future of the business and ensure that we could never be put in a position like this again. One of the first decisions we made was to overhaul the way we operated. We needed to streamline our processes and improve communication between the front and back of the house. We started by investing in new technology, making the ordering system more efficient, and ensuring that everyone was trained on the best practices for managing stress during busy shifts. The next step was to strengthen our relationship with the community. We needed to rebuild the trust that had been damaged during the chaos of the past months. We decided to host a series of events, from charity dinners to community nights, inviting locals to come in, enjoy the food, and reconnect with the restaurant. The response was overwhelmingly positive. It felt good to see the familiar faces of regular customers returning, but it was even more rewarding to see new customers coming in, eager to experience what we had to offer. As the weeks passed, the restaurant's momentum continued to build. We were not only recovering from the turmoil, but we were also growing in ways I hadn't expected. Our staff felt more engaged, and the customers were once again excited to dine with us. Jonathan and I had put a lot of work into ensuring the restaurant's survival, but it was the team, the people who had stuck with us through it all, who made the difference. Their dedication and passion were what truly fueled our success. But even as everything seemed to be falling into place, a shadow still hung over us. We had won, yes, but Graham's influence was far-reaching, and we couldn't be sure that he wouldn't try to make another move. We couldn't afford to take our success for granted. One afternoon, just as we were settling into a routine, I received a phone call that threw me back into that familiar state of unease. It was from one of our top investors. "Maya, we need to talk," the voice on the other end said. "There's something you need to know." My stomach dropped. The last thing I wanted was another complication. I met with the investor later that afternoon, and as soon as I walked into the meeting, I could tell something was off. His face was serious, and he didn't waste any time. "There's a rumor going around," he said. "Some of the investors are concerned about the future of the business, especially now that Graham's out of the picture. They're worried that the restaurant has lost its edge, that it's no longer the powerhouse it once was. They want you to sell." My mind raced. The idea of selling now, after everything we had fought for, was unimaginable. "I can't sell," I said, my voice steady despite the rush of panic that was bubbling up inside me. "We've worked too hard. This is our future, our legacy." The investor didn't seem convinced. "You need to think about it," he said. "The restaurant may have survived the legal battle, but it won't survive if the investors start pulling back. You need to decide what kind of future you want." I left the meeting feeling like the ground beneath me had shifted. The thought of losing the restaurant was too much to bear, but I also knew that we couldn't keep pushing forward without the support of the people who had helped us get here. Jonathan and I had to make a choice. We needed to ensure that we were in control of our own future, that we weren't beholden to anyone who didn't believe in the mission we had set out to achieve. That night, Jonathan and I sat down together, discussing our options. We knew that we couldn't let the fear of losing everything drive us into making a rash decision. It wasn't about the money. It was about what the restaurant stood for. It was about the community, the team, and the people who believed in what we were doing. We won't sell, Jonathan said, his voice firm. We'll do whatever it takes to keep this place ours. I agree, I replied, feeling the same determination. We've come too far to let it go now. The next few days were filled with meetings, negotiations, and tough decisions. But by the end of the week, we had a plan. We would buy out the investors who were hesitant, taking full control of the business ourselves. It was a huge risk, but it was the only way we could ensure that the restaurant would stay true to its roots. As we made the announcement to the team, I could see the relief on their faces. They had stuck with us through the hardest times, and now, they knew that we weren't going to back down. Together, we had built something worth fighting for, and we were going to make sure it stayed that way. The decision to buy out the investors and take full control of the business was a bold one, but it was the only way we could secure the future of the restaurant. Jonathan and I had made it clear that we weren't backing down, and now we had to prove it. As soon as the announcement was made, the atmosphere in the restaurant changed. There was a sense of relief among the staff, but also a new determination. The weight of the situation hadn't fully hit me until I saw the look on their faces. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about all of us, everyone who had invested time, energy, and belief into the restaurant. I spent the next few weeks working even harder, overseeing the transition and ensuring that every detail was taken care of. It wasn't easy, but with Jonathan by my side and the support of the team, I knew we were making the right choice. The investors who had been hesitant had agreed to the buyout. And now, it was up to us to make sure the restaurant not only survived but thrived. As we settled into our new role as the sole owners of the business, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. A few months ago, I had been just another waitress, trying to make ends meet. Now, I was at the helm of something I had helped build from the ground up. There were still so many challenges ahead, growing the business, ensuring its long-term success, but I felt more confident than ever before. We had faced down one of the most powerful men in the industry, and we had won. We weren't going to let anything or anyone tear us down now. One morning, as I was sitting in my office, reviewing financial reports, Jonathan walked in, his face serious. I looked up at him, concerned. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I've been going over some things," Jonathan began, his voice tight. "There's been some talk from the outside. Some of the people we've dealt with, other businesses, investors, even some of the media, they think we're vulnerable. They think that just because Graham's gone, we're no longer a threat. And that worries me." I frowned, leaning back in my chair. "What do you mean? We've proven ourselves. We've fought for this." Jonathan nodded, but there was a worried look in his eyes. "That's the thing. They think we're just the underdogs who got lucky. They think it was all just a fluke. And I'm worried that if we don't show them that we're here to stay, we're going to keep facing these attacks. They won't stop." His words hit me hard. I had always known we were up against more than just Graham, but hearing it from Jonathan made it feel real. We weren't just fighting for our restaurant anymore. We were fighting for our place in the industry. We had to prove that we weren't just a passing trend. We were building something that was going to last. "So what do we do?" I asked, determination creeping into my voice. "We take control," Jonathan said firmly. "We show them who we are. We push the restaurant forward, create a brand that can't be ignored. We make sure everyone knows we're here for the long haul. And we make sure we take care of our people, our team, our customers, and everyone who believes in us." His words were a rallying cry, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a surge of energy. Jonathan was right. We weren't just survivors. We were pioneers. We were going to prove that this restaurant was not just a victory against Graham. It was a testament to everything we had worked for. We spent the next few weeks implementing a series of changes designed to push the restaurant into the future. We revamped our marketing, bringing in new ideas to attract younger audiences and increase our social media presence. We launched new menu items that showcased our dedication to quality and innovation. We also invested in our staff, offering additional training, raising wages, and creating a more inclusive environment for everyone. The changes didn't go unnoticed. As we pushed forward, the industry began to take notice as well. Our new direction caught the eye of critics, and before long, we had people coming from all over the city to see what we were doing. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, and the restaurant was starting to get the attention it deserved. But even as the restaurant began to flourish, there was a lingering feeling in the back of my mind. The fight wasn't over. We still had to prove ourselves, not just to the outside world, but to ourselves as well. We couldn't rest on our laurels. We had to keep pushing, keep growing. One afternoon, just as we were gearing up for the evening shift, I received a call that I wasn't expecting. It was from one of the top food critics in the city. "Maya, I'm coming in tonight to review your restaurant," he said, his voice steady. "I've been hearing a lot of good things, and I want to see it for myself." My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment we had been waiting for. This was the kind of recognition that could propel us into a new league. "We'll be ready," I said, my voice firm. I hung up the phone, adrenaline rushing through my veins. I turned to Jonathan, who was standing nearby. "This is it," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "The review we've been working for." Jonathan nodded, his own excitement evident. "Let's make sure we don't mess this up." As the critic arrived and sat down for his meal, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. We had fought for this, and now we were on the cusp of something incredible. The evening went flawlessly. Every dish was perfect, every detail taken care of. We delivered an experience that was second to none, and by the time the critic left, I knew we had done our best. The next day, the review was published. It was glowing. "A game changer in the restaurant industry," he wrote. "This restaurant is not just a place to eat. It's an experience. The future of dining is here, and it's spectacular." The praise was overwhelming. But it wasn't just about the review. It was about everything we had accomplished. We had survived the storm, and now we were thriving. We had shown the world what we were made of, and we weren't going anywhere. We were here to stay. As the weeks passed, the success of the restaurant seemed to snowball. The critics' review had given us the recognition we had longed for, and our loyal customers returned in droves, eager to see what the buzz was all about. Even new faces, people who had never stepped foot inside before, came in to experience what we had created. The momentum was undeniable, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to breathe. We had fought so hard to keep the business alive, and now it was thriving. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still in the middle of a battle, and the fight wasn't over. Graham's shadow had loomed large for so long, and although we had emerged victorious, I knew that his influence would never truly fade. I spent the next few months focusing on strengthening our foundation, improving internal processes, ensuring the team felt valued, and continuing to build on our success. I wanted to make sure the restaurant was positioned for long-term growth, but most of all, I wanted to protect it from any future threats, no matter how subtle. One morning, I arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual to go over some numbers with the finance team. The restaurant was running smoothly, and everything seemed on track, but as I entered my office, I found an envelope on my desk. It was sealed, with no return address, just my name written in bold letters. A cold chill ran down my spine as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message typed in black ink. "You can't hide forever. I know what you've done, and I'll be back." The note wasn't signed, but I knew exactly who it was from. Graham. My heart pounded in my chest as I read the words again. The relief of the past few months felt like a distant memory now. We were no longer under attack, or so I thought. My first instinct was to go straight to Jonathan, but I knew we couldn't afford to overreact. We had to be strategic. I took a deep breath and set the note down on my desk. This wasn't the first time we had been threatened, and it wouldn't be the last. Graham was relentless, but I wasn't going to let him break us. I called Jonathan, and we agreed to meet. By the time he arrived at the restaurant, I had already gathered myself. We sat down in my office, and I showed him the note. His expression was grim, but there was no panic in his eyes. "He's trying to intimidate us," Jonathan said, his voice calm. "But we can't let him. We've worked too hard to get here." I nodded, feeling the same sense of resolve. "What do we do?" I asked. Jonathan leaned forward, his fingers tapping the edge of the desk thoughtfully. "We need to make sure we're ahead of him. We have to be prepared for whatever he throws our way." I agreed. We had come too far to let Graham drag us back into his web of manipulation. We decided to bolster our security, both digitally and physically. We worked with a cybersecurity firm to ensure our financial records and sensitive information were locked down, and we also hired additional security for the restaurant, just in case. We couldn't risk being blindsided by another attack. As we worked through the next few weeks, the The feeling of unease lingered in the air. Every decision I made felt like a chess move, calculated and measured. Graham had shown that he was willing to do whatever it took to take us down, but I wasn't going to let him have the upper hand. One afternoon, as I was overseeing the dinner service, I received another call from Jonathan. His voice was tight. "Maya, we need to talk. It's about Graham." I stepped into the back office, my heart racing. "What's happened?" "I've been in contact with some of our contacts, and it looks like Graham has been using his influence to try and disrupt our supply chain," Jonathan explained. "He's been contacting our suppliers, offering them better deals to cut us off. It's not just about intimidation anymore. He's trying to hurt us where it matters." My stomach dropped. This was a new low, even for him. He wasn't just trying to sabotage our reputation. He was actively trying to destroy our business, piece by piece. "What can we do?" I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. "We have to find new suppliers, but we need to act fast," Jonathan said. "We can't let him cut off our resources. And we need to expose this. We have to let people know that he's still trying to take us down, even after everything that's happened." We worked quickly to find new suppliers, negotiating better terms and ensuring that we wouldn't be left vulnerable. But we also knew that we had to go public again. It was time to put Graham's actions under the spotlight once more. We gathered evidence of his interference and prepared a statement for the press. When we released it, the response was overwhelming. The public was shocked by the lengths Graham was willing to go to, and once again, the tide turned in our favor. But as the days passed, I realized something important. Graham's attempts to destroy us only made us stronger. Each time he attacked, we fought back with more resilience. We had proven that we could withstand his threats, and now, it was time for us to take control. We weren't going to let him dictate our future anymore. We were in charge now, and we were going to protect what we had built. As the months passed, the pressure from Graham finally subsided. His reputation continued to plummet, and his efforts to ruin us became more desperate. But it was too late. We had already overcome every challenge he threw at us. Our restaurant was thriving, and we had secured our future. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. We had won, and we had done it together. As the months passed, the weight of everything we had gone through slowly started to lift, but the lessons we had learned were firmly ingrained. The victory over Graham and his relentless attempts to tear down everything we had worked for was still fresh in my mind, but I could feel the shift in the air. The restaurant was now more than just a business. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to what could be achieved when you refuse to give up. Jonathan and I had finally found a rhythm. The stress from the constant battles had subsided, and we were now focused on long-term growth. We'd revitalized the brand, found new suppliers, and cemented ourselves as a leader in the industry. Still, there was always that lingering sense of vigilance. We had learned the hard way that success wasn't permanent unless you fought to protect it every day. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office, going over some new marketing strategies with the team when Jonathan walked in. His face, usually calm and collected, was now tight with concern. "Maya, we need to talk," he said, his voice low. "What's going on?" I asked, setting the papers aside. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, sitting down across from me. "We've been getting some offers. Big ones. People want to buy the restaurant." My heart skipped a beat. "Buy the restaurant? Who?" Jonathan sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Investors. Powerful ones. They've seen the success we've had since we took over, and now they're offering to buy us out. They've been reaching out for a while, but I didn't want to bring it up until I knew more." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. After everything we'd been through, after all the fights, the sacrifices, the battles to keep the restaurant alive, now we were being offered a way out, a way to walk away from it all. It didn't feel right. "So what are you thinking?" I asked, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure yet," Jonathan replied, his eyes meeting mine. "It's a tempting offer, but I'm not ready to let go. This restaurant is our legacy now. It's more than just a business to me, and I know it is to you too." I nodded, feeling the same way. This place had become part of me. It wasn't just about the money, the success, or the recognition. It was about everything we had built together, everything we had fought for. "So we turned them down?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We don't take the easy way out," Jonathan said, a fire igniting in his eyes. "We built this from the ground up, and we're not going to sell it now. We have more to do, more to achieve." I agreed completely. It wasn't the right time. We had come too far to just walk away. But as I sat there, a part of me felt unsettled. The offer was huge, and for a brief moment, I had wondered what life would be like without the constant pressure, without the constant fight. But then I remembered why we had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about quitting or taking the easy way out. It was about pushing forward, making our mark, and doing it together. As the days passed, I started thinking about the future of the restaurant. We had built something great, but what would happen next? How could we continue to grow, not just for the sake of success, but for the sake of what we believed in? Jonathan and I had already proven that we could survive the toughest challenges. But now, we needed to ensure that the restaurant could thrive for years to come. We started working on a long-term vision, one that would take us beyond the limits we had reached. We brainstormed ideas for expanding to new locations, improving the menu, and refining the customer experience. We wanted to make sure that the restaurant didn't just survive. We wanted it to stand as a legacy of what could be accomplished when you worked hard, stayed true to your values, and refused to give up. It was a lot of work, but this time, it didn't feel overwhelming. We had built something strong, and now it was time to take the next steps to ensure its future. Then came the moment that changed everything again. One afternoon, as we were reviewing our plans, we received another offer. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just about buying us out. The message was from a major international restaurant chain that wanted to partner with us. They weren't looking to take over. They were interested in expanding with us, helping us open new locations, and bringing our brand to a global audience. The offer was enticing. It was the kind of opportunity that most businesses would jump at. But this time, it wasn't about just the money or the expansion. It was about whether we could maintain the integrity of what we had built. Jonathan and I spent days discussing the offer. We wanted to make sure that whatever decision we made would stay true to our roots, that we wouldn't lose the heart and soul of the restaurant in the process. In the end, we decided to move forward with the partnership. But we made it clear from the beginning that we wouldn't compromise on our values. The restaurant would grow, but it would always remain ours. We weren't just expanding, we were building a brand that would stand the test of time. With the new partnership in place, the future of the restaurant looked brighter than ever. We had survived the toughest of times, and now we were ready to take on the world. But through it all, I knew one thing for sure. We had done it together. Every challenge, every setback, every success, it was all a part of the journey. And as I looked out at the restaurant, filled with people enjoying their meals, I knew that this was just the beginning. The weeks following our decision to partner with the international restaurant chain were a whirlwind. The offer had been too good to pass up, an opportunity to expand our brand to new markets, bring in more talent, and gain access to resources that would propel us to even greater heights. But as we began the process of expansion, the pressure to deliver on our promise grew heavier. We couldn't afford to lose sight of what made us successful in the first place. Our team, our values, and the atmosphere that had become the backbone of our brand. All of that had to remain intact, no matter how big we grew. It was a constant balancing act. We worked tirelessly on setting up new locations, training new employees, and fine-tuning our menu to cater to a broader audience. Every decision was carefully calculated, and every move had to be made with precision. There were sleepless nights, endless meetings, and moments when it felt like the weight of it all might break us. But through it all, Jonathan and I never lost sight of why we were doing this. We had built something together, a restaurant that wasn't just about food, but about community. And as long as we stayed true to that vision, I knew we could succeed. However, no success comes without its challenges. As we began to open new locations, there was a surge of attention from the press and the public. The media loved the story of our rise from a small neighborhood restaurant to an internationally recognized brand. But with that attention came scrutiny. The pressure to maintain our reputation while expanding was immense. Critics started to question whether we could stay true to our roots as we grew. Would the larger corporate partnership dilute our brand? Would we lose the personal touch that had made us so beloved by our customers? These were the questions I was forced to face on a daily basis. One afternoon, as I sat in the conference room reviewing the latest marketing strategy, Jonathan walked in. His face was tense. I could tell something was off. "We need to talk," he said, sitting down across from me. "What's going on?" I asked, immediately feeling a sense of urgency. "There's a report from one of the new locations. They're having trouble with the staff morale. They feel disconnected from the vision of the brand, Jonathan explained. We've expanded so quickly, Maya. The team that got us here isn't the same one that's running these new locations. We can't afford to lose our identity. I felt a pit in my stomach. This was exactly what I feared. We had worked so hard to create a culture, an environment where everyone felt like family. But with growth came change, and not all of it was good. What do we do? I asked, already knowing the answer. We need to reconnect with the team, Jonathan said. We have to remind them why they're here, why this matters. We need to get back to our roots. The idea was simple, but the execution would be difficult. Rebuilding team morale and ensuring that our values were upheld across multiple locations would take time. But we had no choice. We had to act fast. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan and I traveled to each of the new locations, meeting with staff, listening to their concerns, and reminding them of the vision we had created. It wasn't easy. Some employees had felt alienated by the rapid changes, and many had lost sight of the personal connection we had always fostered with our customers. But as we spoke to them, as we reminded them of the passion that had driven us to this point, we saw a shift. Slowly, the team began to come together again. The sense of camaraderie returned, and the energy that had made us so successful in the beginning started to make its way back into the restaurants. It wasn't an overnight fix, but it was a start. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and travel, Jonathan and I sat down in the restaurant's office, exhausted but determined. We're making progress, Jonathan said, looking at the reports from the past few weeks. But there's still a lot of work to do. I nodded, rubbing my eyes. I know, but we're on the right path. The weight of it all was still heavy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of confidence. We had faced countless obstacles, and we had overcome every single one. This, too, we could handle. As we moved forward, I knew that our next challenge was going to be one of the biggest yet. We had already proven that we could take on competitors, media, and even powerful enemies. But now we were facing the challenge of scaling a business without losing the very soul that made it so special. It was a delicate dance, but I trusted that we could do it. Our team, our values, our community, it was all part of the bigger picture, and we weren't about to let go of any of it. As the months passed, we continued to grow. The new locations thrived, and our brand became more recognized than ever. But we never lost sight of the heart of the business. We stayed connected with our team, continued to innovate, and made sure that every decision we made was in line with the values we held dear. With each success, I felt more and more confident that we had not just built a restaurant, but a legacy. And as the future stretched out before us, I knew that this was only the beginning. As the months continued to roll by, the momentum we had gained after our partnership began to take shape in ways I hadn't anticipated. The expansion was going smoother than I had expected, and the new locations were thriving, surpassing expectations. But with that success came its own set of challenges. The business was growing, but so were the demands. There were moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I was truly prepared for the kind of scale we were reaching. The pressure was high, and I found myself stretched thinner than I had ever been. Yet, through it all, I kept reminding myself of the purpose we had fought for. This was more than just a restaurant. It was a reflection of our values, a beacon of what could be achieved with hard work and integrity. Even when the weight of responsibility threatened to overwhelm me, I kept my focus on the bigger picture. Jonathan was the steady hand I had always relied on, and together we navigated through the difficult decisions that came with scaling the business. The team, too, had adapted to the changes. Everyone seemed more connected, more driven. But even as we celebrated our successes, a part of me knew that we couldn't just coast on past victories. Every day brought something new, new opportunities, new challenges, new threats. And just as we were finding our footing, an unexpected situation emerged that tested everything we had worked for. It started with a phone call one morning. I had just gotten to the office, feeling energized and ready to tackle the day, when my phone buzzed. It was from one of our investors, one of the new partners from our recent expansion. The tone of his voice was serious, and immediately, my stomach dropped. Maya, we need to talk. It's about the new locations, he said, his voice tight. What's going on? I asked, trying to stay calm. There's been an issue with the permits for the last location we opened in the city, he explained. It seems like there's some kind of problem with zoning laws. If it doesn't get cleared up, we could lose the property and the entire restaurant would have to shut down. I felt a wave of panic hit me. This was the last thing we needed, especially after everything we had worked for. We had invested so much into this location, and to think that it could all fall apart over something like zoning issues was devastating. What are we doing about it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We're working with legal to sort it out, the investor replied. But I wanted to give you a heads up. It's going to be a tough fight. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. This was another test, and it wasn't one I had seen coming. Jonathan walked into my office a few minutes later, and I could tell from the look on his face that he knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked, concern etched on his face. I quickly explained the situation to him, and we both sat in silence for a moment, taking it all in. We can't afford to lose this location, Jonathan said finally, his voice resolute. We've worked too hard, and the timing couldn't be worse. But we'll fight it. We'll find a way. I nodded, my determination growing. We couldn't let this setback define us. Just as we had done before, we needed to act quickly and decisively. Jonathan and I met with our legal team, and we began to explore every possible solution. We knew it wasn't going to be easy, but we also knew that we had built something too important to lose. Every day felt like a battle. We gathered documents, worked on negotiations, and prepared for what would likely be a drawn-out legal process. Our legal team was confident, but I could tell that even they understood the stakes. This wasn't just about one location. It was about proving that we could overcome any obstacle, no matter how big or small. As the weeks passed, the pressure began to mount. We had been fighting for so long, and the thought of facing another challenge so soon felt like a punch to the gut. But the team rallied behind us. We had built a community, not just of employees, but of people who believed in the mission we had created. They wanted to see us succeed just as much as we did. That was the fuel that kept us going. And then, just as we were starting to feel the strain of it all, a breakthrough came. Our legal team had managed to find a loophole in the zoning laws that would allow us to keep the location open, at least for now. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was enough to buy us the time we needed to get everything in order. We celebrated the victory, but we knew it was just the first step. There was still a lot of work ahead of us. The battle had not been won yet, but it was a sign that we could handle whatever came our way. The whole experience was a reminder of why we had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about building a restaurant. It was about creating something that stood for more than just food and profit. It was about resilience, about never giving up, no matter how many times the world tried to knock us down. As I sat back in my office that evening, reflecting on everything we had been through, I realized something important. We had come a long way, and no matter what came next, I knew we had the strength to handle it. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a legacy, and we were going to keep fighting to protect it. The legal battle with Graham, though exhausting, had taught us one undeniable truth. We were stronger together. Jonathan and I had built something incredible, and no matter the obstacles, we knew we could overcome anything. But as we moved forward, I could feel the undercurrent of tension in the air. The challenges were never truly over. Every decision felt more critical now that we had become a beacon for others to watch. People who were waiting for us to slip, waiting for us to fail. And just when I thought we were finally gaining ground, a new challenge appeared, this time from within. One evening, after a particularly busy shift, I received an unexpected phone call from one of our senior managers. "Maya, we need to talk," he said. His voice sounded strained, and I could tell something was wrong. I immediately felt a knot in my stomach. "What happened?" I asked. "It's the staff," he replied, sounding more troubled with each word. "There's been a lot of frustration behind the scenes lately. Some of the newer team members are feeling disconnected, and there's been some tension. We're losing our sense of unity." I sat back in my chair, the weight of his words sinking in. The last thing we needed was internal strife at a time when we were fighting to maintain our position. "What do you mean by disconnected?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "There's a divide," he explained. "The new team members are feeling like they're not part of the original vision. Some of the staff, who've been here since the beginning, feel like things are changing too fast. It's affecting morale, and that's causing some of the tension we're seeing." I could feel the stress building as I processed what he was saying. It wasn't surprising. Growing pains were inevitable, but it hurt to hear that the unity we'd built was starting to crack. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice tight. "We need to address it head on," he said. We need to bring everyone together, remind them of what we're all working toward, and make sure they understand that no matter how big we get, we're all part of this team. I'm just not sure how to do it. I sat in silence for a moment, thinking. We had overcome so much already, but this was different. This wasn't an external threat. It was something we had to fix from the inside. Jonathan walked into my office just then, looking as tired as I felt. I shared the details with him, and we both knew we had to act fast. We need to remind everyone of why we started this, Jonathan said, pacing back and forth. We're not just a restaurant. We're a community. We can't lose that. His words rang true, and I knew what we had to do. We couldn't afford to let a lack of unity tear us apart. We had built this business on the foundation of shared vision and hard work. We needed to reignite that sense of purpose. The next day, Jonathan and I called a team-wide meeting. We gathered everyone in the dining area, and I could feel the tension in the room as the team looked at each other, unsure of what was coming. I stood in front of them, taking a deep breath. I know things have been tough lately. I began, my voice steady. We've grown fast, and with that growth comes change. But let me make one thing clear. We are all in this together. We've been through a lot, and we've built something that's bigger than any of us as individuals. But that only works if we stick together. I paused, scanning the faces in front of me. This restaurant isn't just a place to work. It's a place where we take pride in what we do. Where every dish, every service, every guest matters. If we're not united in that vision, we'll lose what makes us special. I don't care how big we get or how many locations we open. This family, this team, that's what has made us who we are. And we can't forget that. There was a long pause, the weight of my words sinking in. Finally, one of the newer employees spoke up. But it feels like things are changing too fast. Some of us feel like we don't know where we fit in, they said, their voice vulnerable. I nodded, acknowledging the truth in their words. I get that, I said. Change is hard. But we need to communicate. We need to make sure everyone knows they're part of this, no matter how long they've been with us. You all bring something valuable to the table. This business works because of the collective effort of each and every one of you. And we're not going to lose sight of that. The room was still, but I could see that the tension had started to ease. Jonathan stepped forward, offering his own words. We've had a vision from the start, he said, his voice calm but firm. We've created something meaningful. But that means we all have a role to play. And we need to make sure we're all pulling in the same direction. That's how we're going to keep growing, together. Slowly, the energy in the room shifted. People began to speak up, sharing their thoughts, their frustrations, and their hopes for the future. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. By the end of the meeting, I could feel a renewed sense of commitment in the air. We weren't just employees anymore. We were partners in something bigger. We all had a stake in its success, and we all had a role to play in making it thrive. The rest of the day went by without incident, and in the weeks that followed, I saw the changes. The team was more unified, more engaged. The tension that had once threatened to tear us apart was replaced by a sense of camaraderie. People were working together, helping each other, and pushing forward with the same sense of purpose that had gotten us this far. It wasn't perfect, no business ever is, but I could see the difference. The restaurant wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And as I walked through the dining room that evening, watching the staff work together to create something special, I knew we had done the right thing. We had faced another challenge, and we had come out stronger. We were a family again, and nothing could break us now. As time passed, the restaurant continued to flourish, and our decision to stand firm, to refuse to sell, paid off in ways we hadn't fully imagined. Jonathan and I often sat in the quiet of our office, looking out over the bustling dining room, taking in the noise and energy that filled the air. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It had become a symbol of everything we had worked for. It represented the battles we had fought, the challenges we had overcome, and the strength that had brought us here. But even as things felt like they were finally falling into place, I knew that the journey was far from over. The world around us was changing, and the restaurant industry, like any other, was constantly evolving. We had to stay ahead of the curve, continue pushing boundaries, and adapt to whatever came next. There were moments when the weight of leadership seemed almost too much to bear, but then I would think back on everything we had been through. We had faced down some of the most powerful people in the business world, and we had come out stronger every time. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we were ready. Jonathan and I began working on plans for the future, outlining new goals for the next several years. We set our sights on expanding further, exploring new markets, and strengthening our brand's identity. But we also focused on what mattered most, the people. The team we had built wasn't just a group of employees, they were family. We wanted to make sure they were taken care of, that they had the same opportunities for growth that we had been fortunate enough to have. We invested in training programs, leadership development, and incentives that would ensure that everyone had a chance to reach their potential. Our efforts didn't go unnoticed. As the months passed, the restaurant gained more recognition, not just for the quality of our food, but for the culture we had created. We had become a place where people felt like they belonged, where they knew they were valued, and that made all the difference. One evening, as we wrapped up another successful shift, Jonathan and I sat down in the office, a rare moment of quiet after a busy night. He looked at me, a small smile on his face. "You know," he said, "we've come a long way. We've built something special here." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "We have," I said softly. "But it's not just about what we've built. It's about what we continue to build every day." Jonathan smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. We weren't just surviving anymore. We had built something that would last. The restaurant was our legacy, and no matter what came next, we would continue to grow it, protect it, and keep the values we had always held dear at the center of everything we did. As we moved into the future, there were still challenges to face, still obstacles to overcome. But I knew we had what it took to face them. Our journey wasn't just about success or failure. It was about resilience, about the determination to keep going, no matter what. And that was something no one could take away from us. We had made it this far, and there was no stopping us now. The restaurant was just the beginning. Our future was limitless. We had created something extraordinary, and now, it was time to see how far we could take it. In this compelling series of Black stories, we follow the journey of a determined individual who rises from humble beginnings to battle the odds in the competitive world of the restaurant industry. From overcoming legal battles and external threats to rebuilding a business after a tough fight for survival, this narrative showcases resilience, unity, and the power of staying true to one's roots. As the protagonist faces numerous challenges, from business takeovers to internal team struggles, they discover the true meaning of leadership and community. With each victory, the restaurant becomes more than just a place to eat. It's a symbol of strength, growth, and the drive to succeed against all odds. These Black stories are a testament to the determination and perseverance required to build something lasting, no matter the obstacles. Through every setback and triumph, we see how important it is to stand firm in the face of adversity. This inspiring journey reminds us that success is not just about achieving goals, but about the people we build with and the legacy we leave behind. The Black stories you encounter here offer not just a story of business, but one of empowerment and passion that touches the heart and inspires all to keep pushing forward, no matter how hard the journey may seem.